Live from Utah's Wasatch Front, the pulse of the Mountain West, where the issues that shape your life meet the truth that sets you free. Across Utah, across the Republic, and around the world, welcome. This is KMMU.
Main Street Media Utah, KMMU. This is Talk, KMMU.org, that is. This is Talk with Jon. Looking forward to being with you here for roughly the next hour. I'll be introducing my guest momentarily, but first, let's get the show off to a proper start by me giving out the show prayer, show mantra. The show prayer, when it comes to doing my show, I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. Then the show mantra: where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty, and the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. All right, folks, looking forward to introducing our guest today. It is the great Joel Skousen. Joel Skousen, he is a political commentator and also Vietnam vet, correct?
That's right.
So happy Veterans Day. I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that to you.
Thank you very much. And we just passed the Marine Corps birthday as well. I was a Marine Corps fighter pilot during Vietnam.
Oh, let's definitely remember that. F4 Phantom, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Actually, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but that is one of my favorite aircraft. It is definitely one of my favorite aircraft. So, all right, let's get to it. So, Joel, just want to say thank you for being here. And folks, you know him, you love him. Let's get to the subjects of the day. Here are the subjects that we want to touch base on. Charlie Kirk cover-ups, the suspicions widen, war preparations against Venezuela, China lures Trump back to her side, election results favor Dems, and the government shutdown. Which one do you want to tackle first, Joel?
Well, let's go ahead and cover the government shutdown first, since it's about to be over, I think. The Republicans finally made a compromise with the Democrats to accept some of their spending. They did not get, the Democrats wanted, of course, to extend the subsidies of the ACA or Obamacare to insurance companies. And Republicans are very resistant to that because the insurance companies, have never been hurt during COVID or anything. They've got special subsidies all during the time. So there's no use going into further debt to subsidize the insurance. That's what the Democrats wanted. They didn't get that. They did get agreement to pay all the back SNAP payments for food stamps. And food stamps is a real problem. It's grown 650% in the past 10 years. And it's now over $9 billion a month. That's $100 billion a year just for social welfare.
And I want to say it's over 40 million people are on benefits.
That's 65 million. Yeah.
65 million. Wow, that's a ton of people.
So it's really bad because of a couple of things. One, these people are low-class eaters. They eat junk food almost exclusively. I posted in last week in the World Affairs Brief a video of a guy coming out with 3 shopping carts bought with food stamps, and it's all junk food. Candy, donuts, Coke, and other diet drinks, and it's just there wasn't a healthy piece of food in the whole basket, and that's what our food stamps are buying, and that's the type of people. Now, these people are not starving. If they're starving, the government could give them rice, they could give them beans, they could give them healthy food that they could cook themselves, but and that's what they do in Mexico. They subsidize the price of rice and beans, so nobody starves, but you've got every incentive to go out and work if you want a higher class diet. And there's actually nothing wrong with rice and beans compared to the junk food that the snaps or the food stamps people are buying with. So in terms of the shutdown, this is the longest shutdown ever. And one of the reasons why it's gone so long is that Donald Trump, for the first time, has handled it properly. In the first term, he did what the Democrats told him to do, or the bureaucrats told him to do. He shut down all the things that inconvenience people. You couldn't get a passport. You couldn't enter any of the public park or national parks. You couldn't get anything registered with the FAA or anything else that required federal assistance. But this time, Trump decided to keep all essential services open and or deferred in terms of payment. He had a problem with the air traffic controllers. The Democrat controllers were calling in sick falsely, which is against the law, by the way. They could lose their jobs over that. But they know they have the government over the barrel because there's a shortage of of air traffic control officers and a pilot. I mean, these people are really good. I appreciate them very much. They really are essential workers. And Trump made a point to try to keep the military paid. He should have actually, I think, paid the air traffic controllers as well. And then the judge came out and said, well, you've got to make all the food bank payments, the SNAP payments. And that's actually an illegal action of a judge. It is the exclusive prerogative of the executive branch to determine when you have a government shutdown, you don't have enough money to pay for all the things that Congress has authorized, that they must make the decisions on what to cut and what to spend on based on good income. So Donald Trump did a pretty good job here, but it kept going long and long, and the Democrats voted 14 times to not pass a compromise bill. And remember, the Republican program was excessive in spending anyway. I mean, it was terribly inefficient and deficit. It did not cut spending. It did cut some of the things that the Democrats really wanted, and they held it hostage. But Donald Trump and the Republicans have made a compromise. The Senate has passed it, and they're waiting for the House to pass it. I don't know if they passed it today, but it's scheduled to either be today or today.
I have not seen nor heard as of the time we went on air. And I must admit, it was about 10 minutes before we went on air that I last checked. So no, I haven't seen anything to that they.
But in any case, what I want to wrap this up with is to say that the government shutdown has not been solved. It simply extends it till the fall of next year, and we're going to have the same thing over again. You cannot pass a budget with the almost even split with the Democrats and Republicans. You just can't do it. So we're going to have these continuing resolutions, and they're going to go on and on forever. There's no way that we're going to solve the deficit. We're going to ever have a budget surplus again. We're just cruising towards eventual bankruptcy. And I think that war will precede that, and that's what they intend to wipe away the debt with. I think they'll just simply say, we're going to start over because of the horror of the war, and it will be a crisis. I mean, nobody's going to have any bank accounts because there's not going to be any electricity for long periods of time in the war if after an EMP strike takes down the grid. So this is much worse than people are thinking, and what the government is preparing for, much, much worse.
Okay. I think that is probably the outcome. In fact, I was texting with a friend of mine, and he was like, another host with a totally different network. And he and I were texting back and forth, and I'm like, China's preparing for war. Russia is kind of getting there, but China's totally preparing for war. And he's like, we're not going to war with China. I'm like, why in the world is China building so many ships? They've got a huge army.
And missiles. They're building thousands of anti-ship missiles. They intend to take down our Navy.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, you and I are going to find out who's right and who's wrong here within the next decade is what I told him. And I said, I wouldn't be surprised if it's sooner. And now on top of that, he's like, well, what in the world makes you think? He goes, they lose all the money of the United States. I'm like, they don't need to worry about the money of the United States. They have enough. The ability to grow, or not grow, but produce. Manufacture whatever they need. They don't need the United States.
Well, the main reason, the argument you should give, though, is they intend to take over the economies of the U.S. and NATO and Europe, and that's why they're going to try to nuke only military targets, not cities, in the first strike, so that they can blackmail us into submission. And it's going to be a very serious problem when the military is relatively destroyed And that's the reason our globalist leaders are going to allow that to happen, is so that they can talk us into joining a militarized global government as a result of having our military taken down. And so this is the real problem. But in terms of the economic argument, that just doesn't hold water. Got to remember, to quote them, the General Hao Tian, 2011 said, we need the agricultural lands of North America and Canada because we can't feed our country. And we're not going to be nice to people like the Nazis were. We're going to be ruthless. And so these naive people who think that because there's an economic tie between the U.S. and China would take a real hit manufacturing wise if they lost our market during the war. But they look at the long term. The Chinese have always thought long term. You read Sun Tzu, the Chinese military philosopher.
Yes.
They look the long term, and they don't care about humanity. They don't care about their own people. They don't care how many people die. The Chinese are absolutely ruthless about prisoners, torture, anything. In a war, you don't want to be in China and get captured and be subject to Chinese torture. You just don't want to have that happen to you.
We're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of, if I remember correctly, the Chinese look at 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year plans. I mean, that's what they think in. So, United States, we might think in a couple months plan. I mean,
no, the United States, and investors, they've got 10 and 15-year plans, but that's stupid to think about investments with a 10-year, 15-year return when they're going to have war probably within 5. That's just stupid to look at the horizon and see the war preparations of Russia and China and to think, well, I'm going to build an apartment complex that's going to take 15 years, or we're going to rebuild Gaza and turn it into a resort city that'll take 20 years. I mean, who's going to be around to do that? This is going to be a horrific war. In fact, I'm not even sure that we're going to recover from it. It's not going to be like World War II, where you have a peace and all of a sudden you start to rebuild.
In World War II, we built almost everything we needed. I mean, we did struggle getting rubber, right? We struggled getting rubber in, but just about everything else we were able to produce here in the United States. We can't do that. That's one of my big, that probably is the single biggest concern if we do go to war. Let's just say somehow that we're able to survive the EMP, or for whatever reason they don't do it. How in the world do we deal with the lack of all of the manufacturing that happens in China? It's not like we can turn the light bulb on and make that happen here.
Especially since most of the light bulbs are made in China.
Well said, sir. Well said. I remember Ron Paul getting up before Congress, and it was the old incandescent light bulbs. And he goes, these are made here in America. And then he holds up the other, I can't remember which light bulb it was. He goes, they're not made in America. Why do we want to get rid of them? Okay, so the government shut down. You said he did a couple of things right. I want to get to kind of like a greater overall statement. Ben Shapiro is kind of a fence sitter guy on this one. He's like, well, we just need to play the long game. We need to make sure that we get the right people in. Another thing he says is, the Republicans just need to win, even if we get moderates, really, basically rhinos. And he goes, we just need a win. And I'm like, Ben, we've got $38 trillion budget. It's going to fall apart. At some point in time, if we don't have war, which I think we will, but let's pretend that is not going to happen. The economy is going to come crash into a halt because the United States is going to go into bankruptcy. The debt of 38 trillion and just the interest on the debt is killing us. We've got to do something about it, and we're doing nothing about it. So that is a big concern of mine. Your thoughts?
Yeah, you said 38 trillion, I think, for the deficit. Well, it's the national debt, not
national
the budget.
Debt. I apologize.
Not the budget.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The budget's generally around $3 trillion, which is outrageous, in and of itself. But, the good thing about a government shutdown is that you get to decide not to pay foreign aid. You have an excuse not to pay foreign aid. I wouldn't stop the government shutdown. I would just make sure that we live within our means. and I would probably stop paying some of the national debt, of the interest of the national debt. I would make sure that there'd be no welfare paid, that everybody is on your own now, can't rely on Uncle Sam. And, and the Democrats would probably come around pretty soon. And
I'm
of
going to
course,
say, I'm going to say Donald Trump. There's no way that he doesn't
no.
want to pay the interest. You stop paying the interest, Joel, and you're going to be JFK'd.
Well, it depends on what interest you pay. I'm not saying stop paying all interest, but
Okay.
You pay for the things that the pension funds have bought and the other people that are internal to the country. But I wouldn't be paying, dividends to China or any other foreign holders of the national debt. Let them hang. That's the way it goes when you're out of money. But we certainly have no business paying other people in foreign aid when we are, can't live within our means.
Well, okay. So, any other thoughts when it comes to the government shutdown?
No, let's move on. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. All right, so let's hit Charlie. Let's get to the Charlie Kirk cover-up. That thing seems to be exploding on us. Your thoughts?
Well, there's a cover-up on 2 or 3 different levels, and the subject last week was the cover-up is widening, and it's widening now. What I covered to possibly include Turning Point USA itself, the organization which Charlie Kirk headed. And that's because of the strange behavior of some of the people on the staff when this, or even just before the shooting was occurring. I mean, one of the staff members, even before the shooting, climbed up on a wall. There's a little half wall between the tent where he was speaking to the audience and the background building there at UVU. And he started doing a selfie as the shot rang out and and he talked about Charlie Kirk is dead. Well, he didn't even know that Charlie Kirk was dead, or not supposed to know, especially since he had left shortly before that happened. And then the bigger thing was, of course, that Mikey McCoy, who's the chief of staff, which is the right-hand man of Charlie Kirk, was in the background when the shot rang out, and he immediately walked away. He didn't rush up to help. He didn't go to see what was going on. He walked behind the tent, put his phone up to the ear, and started talking to someone, and didn't stop talking till he was still 300 or 400 yards past where they were loading him into a car. Now, he says later on that he was talking to Erica, who was in Arizona, the wife of Charlie Kirk. But if you're talking to the wife, she's going to want to know, well, what's happening now? He would have had to stuck around and to observe in order to tell her what was happening now. Well, he's loading in the ambulance. He would have been standing by the ambulance, talking about his condition. He would have been describing everything if he was talking to Erica. He was not, in my opinion, talking to Erica Kirk.
Okay, so this is not something you like to do a lot of. Would you speculate on who he may have been talking to or the type of person he may have been talking to?
Well, it would be only speculation because there's no way to know other than to get access to his phone records, which I think would be very embarrassing. But here's the fact that there's a cover-up. Andrew, the COO of Turning Point Action, Andrew Colvey, said as an excuse for the staff member who was talking on the selfie in front of a cell phone. Then he came down immediately off the wall after Charlie Kirk had left and took down the camera that was behind Charlie Kirk. Now that's tampering with evidence. Andrew Colvey said on a group meeting he had on video that the police told him to take down the camera. Now, that's patently false. There's no way that the police would have told him to do anything. In fact, what's strange is the police didn't even put yellow tape around this. They didn't make it a crime scene. They even paved over the area and covered up the blood, covered up all of the evidence, etc. And the police said nothing to this. So there was no, he was hauled off to the hospital, to Timpanogos Regional Hospital, which is about 10 minutes away on the freeway, even though it didn't have a major trauma center. which was at Utah Valley Hospital that was in Provo itself. Now, they're about the same distance away, and Utah Valley might be a little bit closer, but it is clearly through a lot of traffic to get to Utah Valley Hospital. They didn't call an ambulance and wait for an ambulance, and I can understand that. But it seems like this was pre-prepared and that people in Turning Point USA knew in advance that something was going to happen. Now, let me give you the other evidence that I covered last week, and this is mostly covered by several YouTube shows, Ian Carroll and Jimmy Dore and others, and Candace Owens, etc., who have been on this. And I link to those particular videos in the World Affairs Brief. Your listeners can get a free copy by going to worldaffairsbrief.com and clicking on Request a Sample, and you'll get this particular issue that covers these things. But the important point about this is that I covered the Google searches that were done a month and a week prior to the shooting.
So audience, I want you to pay attention to what he's about to talk about, because to me, this may be one of the biggest pieces of evidence that the regular public can know of and go, okay, there's a lot of evidence, circumstantial evidence that there was foreknowledge of this. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, that's what this shows very strongly. Using Google Trends, googletrends.com, you can search what is trending on searches in Google. And you can specify a time and a date and keywords, etc. And it turns out that a week before this shooting, someone in Israel was searching all about Timpanogos Hospital. They were searching all the list of doctors and surgeons at Timpanogos Hospital, and searching for those that had prior connections to police or the Office of Medical Examiner. They searched the specific address where Tyler Robinson dropped his rifle after climbing down off the roof. And there's, as I've covered in the world, there's significant evidence that he could not have made the shot, that a .38-06 would not have stayed within the body. It would have blown his head nearly off. It would have at least destroyed his entire neck. And that's not apparently what was happening. But they're covering up even the autopsy, which did happen before they released the body to go back to Arizona. And the Office of Utah Medical is totally under a gag order. They're not telling anything about what was found in the wound, what the direction of the shot was, any of that stuff that you need to prosecute and to prove your case. And this is the problem. And now, in terms of, and I'm getting ahead of myself in terms of this particular issue, but this is talking really about the government side of the cover-up, where the judge in Utah now has put a gag order on the entire proceedings and made them all secret, even though Erica Kirk has requested that this be a public hearing. So there appears to be, at a government level, a gag order. They want to silence what's going on. They have a patsy laid out. They're going to blame this on Tyler Robinson. But the searches from Israel also included the address of Mikey McCoy and several other significant people that were associated, and addresses that were associated with the fact after the attack. You wouldn't know any of these facts or any of these places like Timpanogos Hospital or the surgeons that dealt with him until after the fact. So why was anyone searching? So here's my speculation. You asked for my opinion. I think if you're going to plan an attack, first of all, you look for a patsy. Now, we're talking about a deep state operation, or in this case, the Israeli Mossad, which is a very close ally of the U.S. deep state. If they're going to do the assassination, they're going to have to pick a patsy, and that's fairly easy to find. You just search through the internet about anybody who's hypothesizing about killing Charlie Kirk, and that leads to Tyler Robinson. So they pick Tyler Robinson, for example, and they say, all right, we're going to induce him, and he looks like he's going to try to do this with his grandfather's rifle, a Mauser with a telescopic sight, etc. And he lives in that area. So if we're going to have someone else shoot him because we don't have confidence that Tyler Robinson is going to make the hit or going to be able to do it. If we have someone else do the shot, we've got to make sure that we cover up the ballistics, because if it's not the 30-06 bullet that they recover from it and match it to the rifle, then they're going to know that it's not Tyler Robinson. And so they first of all then have to say, well, we need to have him taken to a hospital, and that's easy to do if you have insiders within Turning Point USA who know in advance that we're going to shuttle this guy to Timpanogos Regional Hospital instead of Utah Valley, and that we're not going to call an ambulance. Now, all those things are very interesting and rare, to have a shot like that and not to immediately get on your phone and call 911, and they didn't do that. They immediately put him in an SUV and say, we're going to Timpanogos Regional Hospital. That's a little too packed. It's a little too strange in terms of what normal people would do under an accident. If you call 911, they're going to call probably Utah Valley Hospital or the ambulances associated with that. But they clearly wanted him to go to Timpanogos, and they talked to this one, and this one surgeon was there on duty, and he has had cases where he's dealt with police forensics before. So when you're dealing with Utah medical examiners, which is the coroners in Utah, then you're used to taking orders. What they say, shut up, and you don't tell anything about the media, you got a gag order, then they obey. Well, the surgeon ended up telling, according to Andrew Colvey, that the bullet did not exit the neck, which is not possible with a 30-06, unless it hits the spine. And that isn't possible from the direction that he was shooting. Coming in on this side of the neck, it would have gone out this back and missed the spine. But the surgeon told him that the bullet was found just under the skin. Well, that's not a 36-aught bullet unless you maybe shatter the spine and then it drops down inside. But we need that information, and Utah is denying us that information. I've had a call into the Utah Medical Examiner's office, and they refuse to return my call. They won't let you talk to anyone. You have to leave a message.
And if I remember correctly,
but my speculation is that someone from the Israeli Secret Services was tasked with doing this hit job, and they planned it by doing these searches on the internet. Now, there was also a search done from Washington, D.C. There was one done from the Bahamas, but that's typical. If the Mossad is doing something, they got a shooter in the Bahamas, he's going to do his own reconnoiter of the situation to find out what he's going to do. So this is pure speculation at this point. I'm not saying that we have any facts, but the mere fact that someone was searching through Google specific facts that you could not know about in advance, a week in advance, unless you were planning something to be involved in those areas that you were searching.
And to your point, if you were, let's say you were on Charlie Kirk's team, and for whatever reason you happen to be in Israel, or someone that really cares about him and trying to help out Charlie Kirk's team, you would want to send him to Utah Regional Valley Hospital, because it's a much more advanced care and trauma hospital than Timpview Regional. It's Timpview Regional. The best thing they can do is try to stabilize him for a moment and put him on a chopper, and then they'd send him either to Utah Valley Hospital, or they'd send him to downtown to
Salt Lake City,
to one of the two main hospitals in Salt Lake, one in Murray or one up at the U.
Yeah. So that's correct. But it does appear, because of these anomalies of the chief of staff, and there's a video that I linked to in the brief where you see them loading Charlie Kirk into the SUV, getting in, and Charlie and McCoy is about 100 yards further on, still with the phone to his ear, walking away and talking on the telephone. And everybody wants to know, who's he talking to? Well, his father, which is a pastor, Rob McCoy, said that his son called him and told him about the shooting. He had blood all over him, that he was directing people and what to do. And you can see on the video he didn't do anything like that.
Yeah, he didn't do any directing. That's obvious.
He didn't have blood on him. He was too far away to have blood on him. The blood, if anything, went onto the back of the tent. He walked behind the tent, away from that. He didn't handle. He didn't go up and try to rescue or put him in the car. That would explaining having blood. But he lied to his father, and that's on video as well. So there does appear to be some insider knowledge, I think. And what would be the motivation for TP USA to do something like this? Well, I'm only speculating. But you see, they were a big pro-Israel organization that was getting millions in donation from wealthy Jewish donors based upon the premise that you will support Israel during this war. And Charlie Kirk started to turn against that pro-Israel agenda. He was very much against and spoke out against the killing of Gaza civilians in deference to saving lives of Israeli soldiers. They would rather bomb the civilians rather than risk their soldiers' lives. But he also caught wind of the very true thing, which I covered in the World Affairs Brief, about the Israeli government pulling out 80% of the Gaza brigade prior to October 7th invasion by Hamas. And I also covered the fact that the people who were in charge of monitoring the electronic fence had their connection cut to headquarters. The headquarters didn't want to hear about the bulldozers breaking through the fence. In other words, like 9/11, this was a setup in order to justify going after Hamas. And they purposely sacrificed Israeli lives in order to be able to go after Hamas. And I knew, and I've said it, that, you're not going to be able to kill Hamas. You've made so many enemies in Gaza that they can reconstitute whatever you kill very, very rapidly. And that's exactly what's happening. And to this day, despite the great peace deal that Donald Trump says that he has, you still don't have peace. And Hamas has not given up fighting yet.
I think that one's going to come back to haunt Donald Trump.
Well, everything in foreign policy that he's done is going to come back to haunt him, especially, trying to deal with Vladimir Putin as a friend, and he keeps betraying him, and yet and Xi Jinping keeps betraying him, and yet he keeps going back. He keeps letting these people come back. But let me just finish the Charlie Kirk thing before we go on to China and those types of things. The important thing to know is that when you have millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars coming from Jewish donors, and then you turn against Israel, all that money is going away.
Yes.
And so you have a lot of high-paid staff there that's making six-figure salaries, and they know what that cutback is going to be. So there is a financial incentive, is my speculation, to go along with the fact that we've got to remove Charlie Kirk to save our organization, for the good of the organization. And I don't think for a minute that these people who were in TPUSA were capable of even planning this organization, but I think that they had advanced knowledge. That's my speculation.
At this moment, I don't think it. So my follow-up question is how high up does this go into the TP or TPUSA? Because the very top person is supposedly Erica Kirk now, and I'm like, how high does it go? So I'm not going to. I don't think
it could involve Erica at all. It's very likely that there's some foreknowledge from Mikey McCoy and other staff. For Andrew Colvey, for example, covered up for the staffer who took down the camera by saying the police told him to, and there's no evidence of that I can find.
Okay. All right. Let's you mentioned it. You said foreign policy, Trump's going to have real issues with. So let's, and you mentioned China. Let's get into China. Basically, China lures Trump back to her side.
Well, it's interesting that Trump's greatest weakness is his ego. His claim that he is in good relationships. He just likes to pal around and be chummy with people who are high up and famous or were famous before he came along in foreign policy. Any European leaders, Vladimir Putin, that's why he kept bragging about there wouldn't have been a Ukraine war if I'd been president. I have such a good relationship with Vladimir Putin. And what did Vladimir Putin do when he became? He slapped him in the face by continuing to attack Ukraine. And then he had this summit meeting in Alaska. and Putin just laid on the flattery. And this is the key. I quoted in the brief one of the people from the State Department saying, they've got Trump's number. They know, every foreign policy person knows that if you flatter Donald Trump enough, you can get anything you want. And that's what they've done on the tariff negotiations. They made promises that they aren't being fulfilled because they flatter him and they tell him, we're going to invest $300 million. And we haven't seen any of that $300 billion, invested in the United States from Europe yet. China, for example, when they cut off or threatened to cut off rare earth minerals to all the Western nations, not just the United States, that was a major crisis, of course, because any high-tech manufacturing, including vehicles, requires high-tech super-controlled, magnets and computer chips and other things that are manufactured in China. And so Donald Trump throws 100% additional tariff. That's about 145% total tariff on Chinese goods coming in. Now, that's a game stopper for Chinese imports. Even Walmart was saying we're going to have to start raising prices in October if these tariffs go through. And so just before the November 1st deadline, when these tariff increases would happen, Trump shuttles off to the Asia summit. He's in Korea, and he ends up having a meeting. Even though he had declined having a meeting from China before that, he's saying, we have nothing to discuss. He was so upset with China's slap in the face about cutting off rare earth minerals. And, China previously had also said, we're going to stop supplying composition materials to make fentanyl, and they didn't. And so what did Trump and Xi agree on this time? That he would restart the pipeline. Trump would throw back his tariffs, withdraw the 100% down to 10%. And what did China get? Well, you see, the status quo before was higher than that. In other words, China actually got a reduction in tariffs for going back to the status quo, for just giving back. Well, they didn't actually give anything. They just simply will restart the pipeline, and they got everything that they wanted. And that was only for 1 year. The deal is for 1 year. That means that they can start this thing all over again and cut off the rare earth mineral supplies again after a year. There's no long-term agreement that was signed. It's all paper promises. Now, that's why the Supreme Court is handling and is going to take up the tariff, and they've already heard oral arguments on that. There's a lot of skepticism about his using emergency powers to do this. And it plays havoc with the economy. You can imagine every industry in the United States imports some of their products for manufacturing. And how do you price those things when Trump keeps changing the tariffs? I mean, he gets mad at Canada because they wouldn't cut this video, which was using Ronald Reagan's complaint about tariffs and airing that to Canadians. And Ronald Reagan was right. Tariffs are a very bad idea. Because they wouldn't cut that video, Trump then just raised the tariffs in Canada arbitrarily, and suddenly everybody's building houses and construction. All their bids are off now because the import from Canada is going to be much higher now. So this is just no way to run a country. And even though I am very appreciative of what Donald Trump in terms of cutting DEI, it has not killed DEI or the pro-LGBTQ community. They are still very alive and waiting for Donald Trump to go away, and they're going to start again. And that's the problem with Donald Trump telling the Republicans, I want to get rid of the filibuster. If you get rid of the filibuster just to restart the government, and fortunately, the Republicans didn't go along with Donald Trump. Senator Thune, majority leader in the Senate, said there's just no Republican vote, not enough Republican votes to get rid of the filibuster. The Republicans know that's your only defense if the if the Democrats take back the government after Donald Trump's term is over. And I'll tell you, the only way you can stop it is to filibuster, and which requires a 60-vote cloture vote. Cloture means to shut off debate. That's what the 60 rule filibuster is all about. Filibuster is speaking and not yielding up your time. And so basically it stymies any business going on in the Senate until you get 60 votes to shut off debate, which is hard to get under most circumstances. Now, they have inculcated the 60-vote limit on tax increases and on budget resolutions like this because it's actually the job of the House to do all the budgeting.
Right.
Well, for the Senate to overrule or to present an alternative to the House, they need 60 votes to do that. And that's why the Democrats were able to stymie, because the Republicans couldn't get 60 votes to pass their resolution. The Democrats control almost 49% of those votes. So it's a bad idea to do that. Trump has got a lot of, I don't know where he gets these ideas. He was speaking on a military channel once, and he out there on a ship in Asia, and he was saying, do you guys want steam catapults or electric emails catapults? Now, the emails catapults can, shoot off 2 times more as many aircraft as the steam catapults can, and there's less maintenance on it. It does have some berthing problems that they have. But for him to say that I'm going to change everything back to steam, and when there's 4 aircraft carriers on the drawing board of the Ford-class aircraft carriers, and to change, it's not just saying in the same space you're going to put an emails, electronic catapult, you're going to put the steam. No. The steam requires piping going back to the boilers and all this thing. You have to change the entire, or not the entire ship, but a good portion of the ship design. And there's 3 Ford-class aircraft carriers that are being built right now that are not going to get changed without a great deal of expense. And certainly not before Trump is out of office. And this will get changed back again.
Well, to me, the big key is you said they can launch, is it 2.5 times, planes 2.5 times faster than by doing
in combination with the new electronic elevators that they've got for the weapons to get them on deck. They used to have to bring them up through other hydraulic elevators, and it was slower. But now they're much faster, and so the whole total combination about doubles the sortie rate that you can get off an aircraft carrier with the electronic changes they made on the Ford-class carrier. Now, as you know, a carrier pilot as myself, I am only concerned about the fact that it's pretty easy to take out the electronics of a ship, by a bomb in the middle of the deck. Now it can take out the steam lines to the catapult as well. But I think the emails is probably a little more susceptible to attack by the ship. And let me be frank, China is preparing to take out a lot of our aircraft carriers at the beginning days of the war when they start to attack Taiwan. It's not that we don't have ship defenses on the aircraft carriers. We have a lot of SM-6 missiles and others that can intercept missiles, but not thousands of missiles. And China is preparing to launch hundreds and volleys of hundreds, totaling a total of 1,000 missiles at carrier groups. You're not going to stop them all. It's going to be very difficult. Missiles are much, much cheaper to build and fire, and you could just overwhelm a carrier's defenses if you can. So I am really concerned about what's going to happen at the beginning of World War III, which I think the trigger event will be the attack of China on Taiwan, most because the U.S. has said they will intervene. And if they do intervene, North Korea said, we're going to attack U.S. troops in Korea and in Guam and Hawaii. That means with nuclear weapons. And that starts nuclear World War III.
And we're off to the races then. We'll leave that alone for the moment. I want to get to the war preparations against
Venezuela.
Now, okay, so can I... Same friend of mine was like, John, we should not be in Venezuela. There's no, Donald Trump is hitting these boats. He goes, we're just killing indiscriminately. There's no drugs on those boats. I've had some other guests on that actually I feel pretty confident in what they've told me in the past. Seems to have held true. And he's like, no, John, those are drug boats that are coming out of Venezuela. And my friend's like, yeah, the cartels. He goes, the cartels are in Mexico that we've got to worry about. We don't have to worry about Venezuela. And I want your opinion on that because I've actually spoken with people from Venezuela, one that happens to be an American citizen now, but has a number of family members. And he's like, that's the whole reason why I left. But go ahead.
Well, Venezuela is in a very strong conspiratorial relationship with Cuba to undermine America. They are full communists, just like the Cubans are. And Russia now has put naval assets with missiles into the harbors of Venezuela. And they're going to be doing the same with Cuba as well. So we're going to have another Cuban Missile Crisis, in the future. But Venezuela is as part of the Russian coalition, against the United States, it's part of that existential threat. Now,
with China as well.
That's right. Well, that's a separate threat, but these people are tied to Russia directly in terms of their armament, their aid, their fighter weapon systems, their radars. All of the things come from Russia. So this is an extension of the Russian threat, which is an existential threat to the United States. Now, that doesn't mean that justifies a preemptive attack on Venezuela at this point. And I think Donald Trump is using the Tren de Aragua gangs, and we've got the intelligence, which is very true, that Maduro, who is in office illegally after having falsified the election to get elected, and having killed and imprisoned the opposition so that they could not have free elections in Venezuela, has released a lot of these people. What they did, according to one of my sources, is that they went into the prisons where Tren de Agua gangs were located, and they hired them and they armed them to do hits for the government against the opposition, meaning you get to leave prison, here's your machine guns, here's your sniper rifles, here's your bombs and other types of things. Go after this opposition, and after you kill them, you come back to prison, and we give you your next assignment later. And they eventually released some of those to get directly into the United States. And so that is a threat to the United States to do that. So Donald Trump is justified in going after those cartels and Tren de Aragua because Venezuela isn't going to do it. Neither is Mexico, by the way. And I covered in the World Affairs Brief, people within the drug industry have said that the Mexican high officials, including the president, are on the take for up to $100,000 a year to protect the drug cartels. Now, they actually attack and they do some minor things, to lower people, but they are protecting of the cartels, just like they've been protecting illegal immigration into the United States. Mexico is not our friend. And we have a lot of Americans that live in Mexico for the cheap living that's there, and they're getting quite unpopular in Mexico because they're driving up and inflating real estate prices down in Mexico. And so we're going to get an ugly American problem out of Mexico. And so Donald Trump is planning on doing some insertion strikes, probably by air missile strikes into cartels in Mexico as well. And this is going to cause a lot of problems in Latin America. But there is some justification for this, in terms of trying directly, as most communist countries do, to corrupt the American people. And so there is some justification in preemptively going after those people.
What are your thoughts on him attacking the boats in international waters?
Well, I have seen these boats.
Okay, go ahead.
When you have long, thin boats that have 3 200 horsepower Mercury motors on the back, that's for high-speed pursuit and escape from drug and Coast Guard enforcement. That's what those boats are for. And fishermen don't use those boats. Fishermen don't use high-speed, 70 mile per hour on the water boats, speed boats like that. They don't. So even though these may not have drugs on them at the time, these are drug boats. These are enforcement boats. These are fast boats by the cartels. There are a few fast speedboats owned by wealthy people in, Mexico and Colombia and other things, but they are not. They don't look like those boats.
So
these are shiny. These are shiny, top glass, colored red and blue and things. They're not these type of boats. These are just built raw, easy to build boats, high speed hulls, and 3 giant Mercury motors on the back.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's kind of like an open hole, as opposed to the high end ones
all have a deck on them, right?
They have a deck on them, or harken back to
and luxury seats, and a steering wheel and all that, and none of
And
those.
think of Miami Vice. Think of the boat on Miami Vice that you saw. That's the type of boat that is. It's a super high end boat, not some boat that looks like, other than the fact that it has I've counted 3 or 4, large out, Mercury type engines that I figured it was anywhere between 100 to 250 horsepower engines on those boats, just by looking at them. And that's not real close. I don't have the ability to look real close, just seeing the pictures that we see right before they're taken out. You don't have an open hull boat like that. The only time you see even something close to an open hull boat is like in, they don't have that type of engine power to get moving. There's no need for it. So yes. At what point in time do you think that it would be okay for the United States to go in, and do you hit the cartels? Do you go to the next step and take out Maduro, or not Maduro, take out the Venezuela president, or regime change? Because I want to say Donald Trump has said that he has the CIA the CIA is there.
Well, the CIA is infiltrated into most of those countries, and they use a lot of local spies mostly. You have to be Latino to infiltrate Venezuela, and the CIA has a lot of Spanish speakers could pass for Venezuelans or Colombians, etc. in there. They know what they're talking about. They do have the intelligence. I mean, they have satellite photographs of where these boats come from. They can watch them being loaded, with cargo. They can see where they're putting the cargo on the boats. They have what they know to know that these are cartel boats. And let me just answer your question, though. I think what the United States is going to do, I mean, you don't put the Ford-class aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean unless you're going to do some strikes. I mean, they're not built for intelligence and insertion. That's the Marine Corps on the helicopter ship that they've got there, and that has a Marine Corps landing force on it. The force recon has the ability to infiltrate and do reconnaissance and pick out targets. But I think the U.S. is going to order strikes on drug manufacturing, cocaine facilities, and other drug facilities in Venezuela, and try to provoke Maduro into attacking back with his Russian military equipment. That will be the pretext for the war if Maduro takes the bait and tries to strike back at U.S. Things. So I think that Trump is going to try to bait him into a war. And then, frankly, even though
so let me drill down on that just a little bit. Is it Trump that's trying to bait him, or is it people telling Trump that's what you need to do? Because I'm going, are these thoughts coming from Donald Trump himself, or is someone, playing him like a fiddle?
No, you got to realize how the deep state surrounding Trump manipulates Trump. Now, it isn't real deep state. A lot of these are conservatives which have been on the outside of government, which have suddenly got into government because of Donald Trump. And they don't know what they're doing. The deep state knows that Russia is a real threat. They know that, we've got to support Ukraine in order to keep Russia contained conventionally anyway, because they can't strike with nuclear weapons if they can't occupy. And as long as they're fighting in the war in Ukraine, they can't occupy any other country. They're too busy. And so there is a great advantage for the U.S., and the deep state knows this. Why am I stating something that the deep state is doing right? Because, as I explained in my World Affairs brief, the deep state always switches side from building an enemy to attacking that enemy just before the big war that they want, and they've been building these enemies to provoke. They have to switch sides and start being on the right side of the air, that is attacking the bad boys that they built up, so that they don't get accused of sustaining the enemy when the war actually breaks out. So the deep states and the mainstream media is on the right side when they're attacking Russia now. And the stupid libertarian and conservatives, my good friends, are on the wrong side because they think that anyone the deep state is against has to be a good guy after the phony war on terror, when they realized that Iraq didn't have anything to do with 9/11 and neither did Afghanistan, and we went and attacked those countries. And they came to the wrong conclusion that everybody the deep state is against has to be a good guy. So Russia and China, my good friend Ron Paul thinks, are not enemies. And he's just naive as could be about that. Now, so Donald Trump gets intelligence, the kind of stuff I told you about what the narco terrorists are doing out of Venezuela and Cuba and Mexico. And then he gets all upset about it. And he starts to say, all right, we're going to take them down. He doesn't come up with those ideas on his own. But after the appropriate intelligence, which is true, then he gets angry and he starts doing it. It's just like with Vladimir Putin. He flatters Trump in Alaska, and then as soon as Trump goes out to talk to NATO and Ukraine about working with Russia, Russia blasts Ukraine with 800 drones in a night, and Trump feels a slap on the face. And then he gets angry at Putin, and he says, okay, he's not my friend, and but he'll never admit he's wrong. He just says, there's a problem now. But every time Putin makes an overture and says, let's go back and talk, Trump's right there. Every time Xi Jinping comes back and says, let's talk and let's be friends, he's right there. He still thinks that Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea, is his best bosom buddy pen pal. He got so snookered when he was in North Korea the last time he was going to disarm North Korea and failed miserably. He's still deceived by Kim Jong-un. So that's Donald Trump's major foreign policy weaknesses, is just abysmal personal judgment about evil people. He can't see it when they flatter him.
Anything else that you want to cover? It's 6:01. It's about time for us to go.
Yeah,
I definitely want you to mention how people can get a free copy of the World Affairs Brief. I want to say thank you for coming on, but any last thoughts that you want to mention?
Well, just remember that even though the mainstream media is not warning about war, that's the biggest change in your lifestyle that you need to understand, that it's going to destroy your jobs, it's going to destroy your electricity, it's going to destroy your income. You've got a few years to prepare, and you've got to start to do that. You just can't prepare when the lights go out and when the panic sets in. So I just want people to realize, and I was on John B. Wells' Caravan to Midnight last week, and he ended with that same thing. What's your biggest worry about the next 10 years? And I said, war sooner than that. A world war, a nuclear world war, and it's going to happen. And nobody's preparing for it. Businessmen are still making plans out 10 and 15 years about investments and great big things. They're just going to get caught with halfway into construction. They're going to lose everything. So be smart, think more short term, start to sacrifice, start to be prepared, and start to think. And that's what I try to do every week in the World Affairs Brief, is give you briefings on things that are going to lead to surviving. I'm not claiming you're going to prosper during war like the investment people, survive and prosper. No, you just got to survive, and you'll thank me for it someday.
Well,
so people could go to worldaffairsbrief.com and get a free sample copy of the brief. There is a modest subscription of about $1 a week, $48 a year for the brief. But you can get a free sample copy along with options on how to subscribe at worldaffairsbrief.com. Click on Request to Sample on the left-hand side.
And then on top of that, one other thing that you have every single week that is done by your son is the preparedness tip by Andrew Skousen.
That's right. The World Affairs Brief has a very good preparedness tip on various topics, from products to surviving in your gardens and everything. Andrew's an expert in this stuff, and he puts out a very popular preparedness tip every week.
And your articles themselves, just one article as opposed to the multiple points that you have, is probably worth the price of admission. When you throw in everything that you do, it is money well spent. On top of that, on typically Friday afternoon, you get an MP3 version. So if you're out working in your garden, you're working on your car, doing whatever you may be doing, driving, that I often will be doing, I listen to it then. So Joel Skousen, thank you for your time. Appreciate you being here. Thank you for joining us today. Folks, this has been Talk with Jon. I just want to say thank you so much to you.